Dylan had always sensed that something about her life carried a missing piece, an invisible thread tugging at her identity whenever she watched families around her laugh easily, argue openly, or speak about inherited traits with certainty, and although she had grown up surrounded by love and stability, there lingered an unanswered question that no one seemed ready to confront. Who was her biological father? And why had his existence been carefully folded into silence for so many years? The mystery had begun as a whisper in childhood, fueled by accidental comments overheard behind half-closed doors and photographs that seemed deliberately incomplete. But as Dylan matured into a confident young woman navigating complicated relationships and ambitions of her own, curiosity transformed into determination, especially after noticing how certain strangers reacted to her with an odd sense of recognition. Her mother, Grace, had always deflected inquiries with gentle reassurance, insisting that family was defined by presence rather than blood, yet Dylan could see the tension in Grace's eyes whenever the subject arose, a tension that spoke louder than words. The turning point arrived unexpectedly during a charity gala, where Dylan encountered a charismatic businessman whose mannerisms mirrored her own in uncanny ways. The same tilted smile, the same thoughtful pause before answering questions, and although their interaction was brief, it unsettled her deeply, igniting a resolve she could no longer suppress. She began searching through old records, contacting distant relatives, and piecing together fragments of history that had been scattered intentionally, discovering along the way that her birth coincided with a turbulent period marked by secrecy, broken relationships, and decisions made under immense emotional pressure. As the layers peeled back, Dylan learned that her mother had once been involved in a passionate but complicated relationship with a man whose life was entangled in rivalries, corporate ambitions, and family expectations that left little room for scandal, and the revelation forced Dylan to reconsider everything she believed about her origins. Each clue carried emotional weight, leading her closer to a truth that seemed almost too dramatic to be real, yet the evidence aligned relentlessly, guiding her toward a name she had heard whispered countless times in social circles, but never associated with herself. The realization dawned slowly rather than explosively. It arrived through subtle confirmations, a shared medical history uncovered during a routine health appointment, and a confidential document that confirmed paternity beyond doubt, leaving Dylan staring at the page as if it might vanish if she blinked. Her biological father was a man deeply embedded in a powerful legacy, someone whose choices had shaped countless lives, and suddenly Dylan understood why her existence had been concealed, not out of shame, but out of fear of upheaval. Shock mingled with anger as she grappled with the implications. Years of unanswered questions, milestones experienced without a father who, unknowingly or perhaps reluctantly, had remained absent. The emotional storm intensified when Dylan confronted her mother, demanding honesty not from resentment, but from an aching need for clarity, and Grace, exhausted by decades of secrecy, finally revealed the full story. She spoke of youthful love interrupted by circumstance, of promises made and broken, and of a moment when protecting Dylan from public scrutiny seemed more important than asserting the truth. Grace admitted that the man had never been entirely unaware of the possibility of a child but had chosen distance, convinced that involvement would complicate lives already strained by loyalty and obligation. Hearing this, Dylan felt conflicting waves of compassion and betrayal, recognizing that every adult involved had acted according to their understanding of protection, yet the cost had been her sense of belonging. Determined to reclaim agency over her own story, Dylan arranged a meeting with the man who shared her blood, rehearsing countless versions of what she might say while fearing both rejection and acceptance equally. The encounter unfolded in a quiet office overlooking the city skyline, far removed from public eyes, and when he entered the room, the resemblance between them erased any lingering doubt before words were even spoken. Silence hung heavy as they studied one another, two strangers connected by history neither had fully chosen, and when Dylan finally introduced herself, emotions softened the guarded composure he had maintained for years. He confessed that he had suspected the truth, but had respected Grace's wishes to keep distance, believing it was the safest path for everyone involved, a decision he now recognized had deprived them both of invaluable time. The conversation stretched for hours, filled with hesitant questions, shared memories reconstructed from different perspectives, and apologies that could not rewrite the past but began to bridge the emotional gap between them. Dylan listened as he described the pressures that had defined his life: family expectations, corporate battles, and relationships shaped by loyalty and rivalry. And gradually she realized that her story was intertwined with a larger legacy of love, ambition, and consequence. Rather than feeling overwhelmed by the revelation, she experienced an unexpected sense of grounding, as if understanding her origins clarified parts of herself she had never fully understood: her resilience, her instinctive leadership, even her stubborn independence. Yet acceptance did not arrive instantly. It required navigating complicated reactions from others who viewed her emergence into this hidden chapter as both a threat and a miracle. Some welcomed her warmly, recognizing her as an extension of a family narrative long defined by dramatic twists, while others questioned her intentions, suspecting that her arrival might disrupt carefully balanced alliances. Dylan found herself thrust into emotional crosscurrents, forced to defend her authenticity while simultaneously learning to trust people she had only known from a distance. Through it all, she remained focused on building a genuine relationship with her father, choosing patience over resentment, understanding that connection grows through shared experiences rather than declarations alone. They began meeting regularly, discovering similarities that transcended genetics, shared humor, mutual curiosity, and a surprising ease that gradually replaced initial awkwardness. Dylan also re-examined her relationship with Grace, recognizing the courage it must have taken to raise her independently while carrying the burden of secrecy, and their bond deepened as honesty replaced avoidance. The revelation reshaped Dylan's identity, but did not define it entirely. Instead, it expanded her understanding of family as something evolving rather than fixed. She confronted the reality that truth, even when delayed, possesses transformative power, allowing healing to begin where silence once ruled. As news of her parentage inevitably surfaced within their social world, reactions ranged from admiration to skepticism, yet Dylan learned to navigate public scrutiny with grace, refusing to let external opinions overshadow personal growth. She embraced opportunities to learn about the legacy she had inherited while forging her own path, determined not to be reduced to a secret finally revealed, but to become a catalyst for reconciliation among people long divided by misunderstanding. Her father, in turn, embraced the chance to redefine himself beyond past mistakes, discovering that fatherhood, even when delayed, offered redemption he had not realized he needed. Together they faced awkward family gatherings, emotional confrontations, and moments of unexpected joy, gradually transforming what began as a shocking discovery into a meaningful connection rooted in mutual respect. Dylan's journey illuminated the complexity of truth within families shaped by ambition and loyalty, demonstrating that identity is not determined solely by biology, but enriched by the courage to confront hidden histories. The once mysterious absence in her life became a source of strength rather than pain, inspiring her to advocate for openness and authenticity in every relationship she formed. She realized that discovering her biological father was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a new chapter, one defined by forgiveness, self-discovery, and the willingness to embrace both past and future without fear. As she stood between two worlds that had finally converged, Dylan understood that the question which had haunted her for years had ultimately guided her toward deeper understanding, not only of where she came from but of who she was becoming, and in accepting the imperfect choices that led to her existence, she found peace in the knowledge that family, however complicated, could still grow, heal, and evolve when truth was finally allowed to surface. In the weeks following the revelation, Dylan found herself living in a strange emotional afterglow, as if the world had subtly shifted beneath her feet without anyone else noticing the magnitude of the change, and although outwardly her routine remained familiar, meetings, social gatherings, quiet evenings with Grace, and tentative lunches with her father, internally, she felt as though she were relearning how to exist within her own life. Every memory acquired new context, Childhood moments once tinged with confusion now appeared deliberate, shaped by choices made to shield her from a reality too complicated for a child to understand. She revisited old photographs stored in boxes that had gathered dust for years, studying expressions, wondering who knew the truth at the time each picture was taken, and noticing details she had overlooked before, lingering glances exchanged between adults, protective gestures, conversations that stopped when she entered the room. The realization that her life had unfolded alongside a hidden narrative did not anger her as much as she expected. Instead, it awakened empathy, a growing awareness that love often manifests imperfectly when people attempt to protect one another from consequences they fear cannot be undone. Her father, eager yet cautious, began introducing her gradually into aspects of his world, never overwhelming her but allowing glimpses into the intricate network of relationships and responsibilities that had defined his existence for decades. Dylan observed how others reacted to her presence. Some greeted her warmly, recognizing familiar traits and welcoming the opportunity for reconciliation, while others maintained polite distance, uncertain how her sudden emergence might reshape long-standing dynamics. She sensed that she represented both hope and disruption, a living reminder of past choices that many preferred to leave buried. Despite this tension, Dylan refused to retreat. Instead, she leaned into authenticity, determined to build relationships based on honesty rather than inherited assumptions. One afternoon, during a quiet walk along the coast, her father shared stories he had never told anyone before, speaking not as a powerful figure accustomed to control but as a man reflecting on regrets and mischances, admitting that fear had guided more of his decisions than ambition ever had. Hearing this vulnerability dissolved the final remnants of emotional distance between them, allowing Dylan to see him not merely as the answer to a lifelong question but as a flawed human being capable of growth. Their conversations became a refuge for both of them, spaces where past and present intertwined freely, and Dylan discovered unexpected comfort in learning about traits she had unknowingly inherited: a love of strategy, a tendency toward introspection, and a stubborn refusal to abandon people she cared about. Meanwhile, Grace navigated her own emotional evolution, watching mother and daughter relationships expand rather than fracture, and although moments of insecurity surfaced, fears that Dylan might drift away now that another parent had entered her life, those fears gradually faded as Dylan reassured her through consistent affection and gratitude. The three of them began sharing occasional dinners together, tentative at first, yet increasingly relaxed, forming an unconventional family dynamic shaped not by tradition but by conscious choice. Outside this fragile circle, however, the world proved less forgiving. Rumors circulated rapidly, speculation growing as acquaintances attempted to piece together timelines and motives, transforming Dylan's personal journey into public intrigue. She learned quickly that truth, once revealed, invites interpretation from those who were never part of the story, and rather than engaging with gossip, she chose silence, allowing her actions to define her character instead of responding defensively. This restraint impressed many who had expected drama, gradually shifting perceptions and earning respect even from skeptics. At the same time, Dylan faced internal challenges she had not anticipated, including an unexpected grief for lost years, birthdays without shared celebrations, advice never given, memories that could never be recreated. These feelings surfaced unpredictably, sometimes triggered by small moments such as watching fathers and daughters laughing together in cafes or hearing friends recount childhood experiences she realized she would never fully share. Yet instead of allowing sorrow to dominate her, Dylan transformed it into motivation, embracing the present with intensity, determined to build new memories that honored both what was missing and what was now possible. She and her father began small traditions: weekly breakfasts, spontaneous road trips, and long conversations about ambitions and fears, rituals that slowly replaced absence with presence. Through these experiences, Dylan discovered that relationships formed later in life carry a unique depth, shaped by conscious effort rather than obligation. As trust deepened, her father confided in her about challenges he faced within his professional world, seeking her perspective not as a daughter seeking approval, but as an equal whose insight he valued. And Dylan found confidence blooming in ways she had never expected, realizing that her voice held influence not because of lineage alone, but because of her own intellect and compassion. This newfound empowerment extended into other areas of her life, encouraging her to pursue opportunities she had previously hesitated to claim, including leadership roles that allowed her to define her identity independently of family legacy. Still, integration into a complicated extended family brought inevitable confrontations. Unresolved tensions resurfaced, old rivalries reignited, and Dylan occasionally found herself at the center of disagreements she had not created. Rather than withdrawing, she approached these conflicts with calm curiosity, refusing to perpetuate cycles of resentment that had shaped earlier generations. Her willingness to listen without judgment gradually softened resistance, transforming adversaries into cautious allies and proving that authenticity could disarm even deeply rooted suspicion. Over time, Dylan recognized that discovering her biological father had not merely answered a question, it had reconfigured the emotional landscape of everyone involved, forcing each person to reconsider loyalty, forgiveness, and the meaning of family itself. She also began reflecting on her own future, contemplating how this experience might influence the way she approached relationships, parenting, and honesty in years to come. The secrecy surrounding her birth served as both warning and lesson, reminding her that withholding truth, even with protective intentions, carries consequences that echo across generations. Determined to break that pattern, Dylan committed herself to openness, promising that the relationships she built would be grounded in transparency and courage. As seasons changed, the initial shock surrounding her identity faded into normalcy, replaced by a quiet sense of belonging that no longer required validation. Family gatherings became less tense, laughter replaced awkward politeness, and shared experiences gradually rewrote emotional history. Grace found peace in watching the bond between Dylan and her father flourish, recognizing that love had expanded rather than divided, and she allowed herself to release guilt she had carried for decades. Dylan, meanwhile, embraced the complexity of her story as a source of strength, understanding that identity is not a fixed inheritance, but an evolving narrative shaped by choice and resilience. She realized that her journey mirrored broader themes of reconciliation and renewal, illustrating how confronting hidden truths can transform not only individuals, but entire communities. The woman who had once searched desperately for answers now stood grounded in certainty, no longer defined by absence, but enriched by connection. And yet, even as stability settled into her life, Dylan sensed that her story was far from finished. New challenges awaited, new relationships would test her growth, and the legacy she had stepped into carried responsibilities she was only beginning to understand. Instead of fearing what lay ahead, she welcomed it with curiosity, confident that the courage which led her to uncover the truth would continue guiding her forward. In quiet moments, she reflected on the extraordinary path that had brought her to this point, the years of unanswered questions, the emotional confrontations, the fragile beginnings of reconciliation, and felt gratitude for every twist that had shaped her evolution. The discovery of her biological father had begun as a mystery wrapped in secrecy, but it ultimately became a catalyst for transformation, teaching her that family is not defined by perfection or timing, but by the willingness to show up, to forgive, and to grow together despite imperfect beginnings. Standing at the intersection of past and future, Dylan understood that her life would forever carry the imprint of this revelation, not as a scandal or dramatic turning point alone, but as a testament to resilience, love, and the enduring power of truth to reshape even the most carefully guarded destinies.